Hello and welcome to Conservation Connect Live. I'm your host, Brett Billings, and I'll be with you for about the next half an hour. And in our jobs these days, nothing has made the change quicker and faster than technology. It seems like every few weeks, technology changes, and a lot of us are scrambling to keep up with it. But certainly one of the most, let's say, handy and useful technologies to come along for those in the conservation world in recent times is drones, or as we call them in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, UASs. And joining us today, we have the service's UAS Program Manager, Scott Bashaw, who's going to be giving us sort of the inside peek into what's going on in the world of drones and drone flight in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So let's join him right now. So Scott Bashaw, if you would please, give us a little idea of exactly what does UAS stand for.
Thanks, Brett. So UAS stands for Unmanned Aircraft Systems, because obviously we don't have a pilot on board, so they're completely unmanned, but they're not unpiloted. The pilot is on the ground controlling it with a ground controller.
So that's what we've got there with UASs. Let's get a little background on you first. Where are you working out of, and kind of what are your duty responsibilities in relation to the service's UAS program?
So I currently work out of the National Aviation Office, which is located at the National Interagency Fire Center in Boise, Idaho. So as the UAS program manager, I'm overseeing the policies that apply to unmanned aircraft systems, as well as manage the acquisition of purchasing all of the aircraft that we'll be using in the service, as well as training of our pilots. So that's a high-level overview of what my responsibilities are.
So a UAS use in Fish and Wildlife Service doesn't have a super long history. Can you give us sort of a rundown of where we started with drone work in the service and kind of up to where we're at today?
Yeah, so we go back to about 2017 is when we actually started using unmanned aircraft for our own purposes. But prior to that, there were several refuges that had worked with cooperators like NOAA and NASA on UAS projects prior to that time. And then there were other bureaus in the department that have been using unmanned aircraft for remote sensing for a much longer time period. The USGS was probably the first ones to start experimenting with unmanned aircraft when they began using a small tethered blimp to just lift up sensors off the ground and get a high-level overview of areas. They did that over 20 years ago. Then in 2009, BLM and USGS, they both began using small UAS that were received from the Army as surplus equipment, and they used those systems for several years. And it wasn't until about 2016 that inexpensive commercial off-the-shelf systems became readily available. And it was around that time, along with a new remote pilot certificate program that the FAA implemented, that allowed Fish and Wildlife Service to make its first acquisition of an unmanned aircraft and start to train pilots. Prior to that point, you had to have a private pilot's license and an exemption from the FAA to operate drones for work purposes. But after 2016, that really opened up the doors for us. And so our first aircraft after that time period was the 3DR Solo, which I've got one here, and there's one on screen. But so the Solo was the first one that we purchased, and it carried a small GoPro camera right here, but it was also able to carry several other sensors that were under a pound. And it had about a 15-minute flight time. He was able to carry all these different sensors from a regular GoPro camera to a thermal camera, and they were relatively inexpensive. They cost about $2,000. By the end of 2017, the service, the National Aviation Office, had purchased about 35 of these Solos, and we had trained about 19 collateral duty pilots who came from a variety of professional backgrounds. And then in 2018 and 2019, we added a few more models to our fleet, and to meet the other mission needs that we had, and that included a heavy lift multi-rotor, which you see right here, the M600, as well as a fixed wing option that had about a 45-minute flight time, and can carry multiple sensors as well. That fixed wing, just because it was able to take off from in a vertical position and then transition into horizontal flight, it had a really long flight time compared to those multi-rotors. But then we also got a small quadcopter that, if we've got one here, this small one right here can actually fold up so that it's small enough to fit into a little its little case, and you can put that into a cargo pocket. And these cost just under $700. So between all of these systems and the relatively inexpensive cost, we were able to really grow our program from 2017 up until about 2019.
Wow, those are some cool drones that you've got there with you. Just a reminder, folks that are watching from the audience there, if you have questions about the Fish and Wildlife Service's UAS drone program, you're more than welcome to type those into the chat there on YouTube, and we'll try to get to those questions here shortly. So Scott, you gave us a little overview of what the platforms are that we're currently using and looking back at. What about the current uses of UAS in the service?
So I'll go back to that 2019 period a little bit and talk about what happened from 2019 up until just recently. So as I mentioned, our program was growing rapidly, and we had trained over 70 remote pilots by the end of 2019, and we'd have acquired over 150 different aircraft, and we were flying about 12% of the total unmanned flights within the department by the end of that year. But then toward the end of 2019, there was a change in policy that was implemented from the department level, and that actually grounded all of our natural resource projects and other non-emergency operations, as well as prohibiting our future purchases of drones made by companies that were headquartered in adversarial countries. And that was due to a cybersecurity concern. So from October of 2019 until October of 2022, we weren't able to conduct any flights for non-emergency operations, and it's taken until just this past spring to start acquiring compliant aircraft that are capable of meeting our mission needs again. And so since many of our original aircraft were discontinued and critical parts like new batteries weren't available after that long layoff, we're essentially starting the program over with new aircraft. But there's an increased cost associated with these compliant systems, so we're not expecting to be able to replace all of the old aircraft on a one-to-one basis, but we are starting to replace some of those now. And so looking at some of the systems that we are starting to use, last year was a trial and error period where we were testing a few different aircraft, and those didn't work out so well. But just this past spring, we were able to test out this Skydio X10. And so the Skydio is a great aircraft because it has, as you can see, there's 3 cameras in one that it can carry. It's an integrated sensor. It's got one sensor that is a thermal or an infrared sensor. It has a fixed narrow camera lens, color lens, and then it also has a telephoto with over 100 times zoom magnification. And so between all of that, you know, with the zoom camera, you can observe wildlife from a standoff distance. The thermal camera can spot people or wildlife day or night as well, and it can also spot fire. So it'll have a lot of different uses for us in the service. If you need something to cover a larger scale, we used to have a fixed wing, and now we have a newer one that we're replacing that one with, and that's over my shoulder here. This large orange is a hybrid vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, the Wingtra. So it's because it takes off like a rocket, it doesn't need a huge area like traditional fixed wings. It doesn't need a runway, and then it will transition into horizontal flight and give you that long flight endurance that fixed wings typically have. So this aircraft, again, it'll fly 45 minutes to an hour or so, but because it can fly in that horizontal fashion and conserve battery, it can cover about 500 to 700 acres if you're doing a mapping type mission. and it can do that using full frame color cameras. We also can put a multispectral camera on there, and that's going to capture images in the different bands of light spectrum that's used for doing vegetation analysis. But we also have a small LiDAR payload, which uses light in the form of a pulse laser to measure distances, and you can actually produce very accurate surface or terrain models using that. So that one aircraft can carry multiple sensors and can cover a lot of ground. But additionally, we're still currently awaiting delivery of 2 other systems from a company called FreeFly. Those systems are the Alta X and the Astro, and you can see those in the picture there. The Alta X is the larger one, and that's going to be our new heavy lift capable system, because it can carry up to 33 pounds of a payload. And then the smaller one there, the Astro, it has the potential to be our original aircraft, the Solo replacement, because it can also carry multiple sensors up to 3 pounds. So it can carry the full frame cameras, multispectral cameras, it can possibly even carry small LiDAR units. But it's a much smaller airframe to travel with than that larger Alta X, which would actually require special shipping requirements because the batteries are lithium batteries, and require special handling because they're so large. So we've got a couple of good options depending on what the mission is. And between all of these systems, like I said, the cost has gone up for these new compliant systems. So we're looking at from that Skydio that starts at about $16,000 up to the Alta, when configured to carry payloads, will cost around $40,000. And that doesn't include the sensors or the payloads, which by themselves can cost tens of thousands of dollars. While this is a huge cost compared to what we were purchasing 5 years ago, it's still a fraction of the cost of what purchasing new crewed or manned aircraft costs. So there's definitely benefits for using these in our programs.
Well, those are some amazing looking aircraft. And just a reminder to folks viewing, you are listening to Conservation Connect, coming from the National Conservation Training Center here in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. And we are talking with Scott Bishaw, the Services Drone, or UAS, Program Manager. So, Scott, are drones used equally throughout the service, or are there some areas where they are more appropriate for use and see bigger uses?
So there's definitely many diverse uses for drones throughout the service, and we found that it can be used as a tool for most of the professions within the service. We don't hire professional drone pilots. We train our existing staff on how to use these as tools to do their jobs. So for instance, we have our biologists that have to perform wildlife surveys. That's one of the most common types of projects they would do. And so they can do that with a drone, whether it's taking photos and counting the individual animals, or actually using a telephoto lens from the drone to observe and monitor animals at a close range, but without causing any disturbance. So taking a look at this video here, this is about 800 to 1,000 feet away from a osprey platform. This is on Deer Flat National Wildlife Refuge in Nampa, Idaho. And from that distance, you couldn't really see anything, but with this amazing telephoto lens, we can zoom right in, and we can see that there is a bird outside the nest, and there is one on the nest. And this, again, 800 to 1,000 feet away. We're not causing any disturbance because they don't know that we're there. The drone is relatively quiet at that distance, so there's no disturbance involved. And so this is... yeah, so that same use case of doing wildlife surveys, we can take that to also doing locating and identifying invasive species on our refuges, whether it's plants or animals. So this is a look at one of our thermal or infrared videos, and it might be a little bit difficult to tell, but there's some black things moving in the picture. Black is hot in this picture, and these are invasive hogs in Alabama. On one of our refuges, and there is a little bit of a machine learning or artificial intelligence going on here, where the red dot automatically goes to the hottest thing in the picture, and it's tracking that hog as it's moving around. And this actually wasn't a mission where we were out looking for hogs. We were actually just testing the aircraft and the camera and within 2 minutes, these just popped out, very easy to find. So it's a great tool for that use. Besides monitoring with live camera feeds, drones can also be used to map an area by taking dozens or hundreds of overlapping photos that can then be stitched together in special software to create a single high-resolution, geo-referenced orthomosaic map that you can then put into software like ArcGIS, and you can perform vegetation analysis on it or other object classifications, which could be used for things like pre- and post-habitat restoration projects. You could monitor change detection after a dam removal, or you could monitor coastal erosion as a result of changing climate. So with our biologists, there's a number of different ways that they can be using these tools. Within the world of fire management, unmanned aircraft are used to provide situational awareness to the crews that are on the ground. So a drone can provide a big picture overview to crews who usually can't see more than a few feet in front of their face when dealing with thick underbrush and smoke. And so like what we're seeing here on this video of a prescribed burn, it's very easy to see what the fire is doing and where the smoke is going. And we can do this from a safe location as well. But then we can also have that thermal or infrared camera that we can use. And this will reveal exactly where active fire is moving and when sometimes the naked eye can only see where there's smoke. But what we're seeing here is those, we're dialing in the temperature settings for that fire to really show up in that thermal picture. Again, making it really easy to see where the fire is, where it's going, and to do it from a safe location. But then if we take a look at when someone's up in a helicopter without the use of a thermal camera, this is what you would see. This is a prescribed burn in the Florida Keys at the National Key Deer Refuge. And we just see smoke. We can't actually see fire. It's pretty difficult to see. And this is what the pilot of a helicopter would see, or anybody on the ground, you're just seeing the smoke. But then if we look at the thermal image or the infrared image, now it's very easy to see all that yellow. That's where the active fire is. And so if we take a close look and we look at the upper left of that picture, we can see that there's actually a spot fire that jumped over the road. And because we're using that thermal infrared camera, we were able to spot it very quickly before it had the chance to escape and grow. So very powerful tools. But everybody's favorite use of unmanned aircraft within fire management is aerial ignition. And this is something that it's a job that's traditionally performed from a helicopter. We have these little plastic spheres or ping pong balls that they're often called, and they're filled with a chemical powder that then get injected with antifreeze. And within 20 to 30 seconds, they're going to start a chemical reaction and start a little fire. And so we can load up a hopper with these ping pong balls, and traditionally they're put onto a helicopter, and somebody is operating the plastic sphere dispenser while hanging out the door of a helicopter and dropping these ping pong balls down to the ground where they start the fire. This is it's altogether a rather dangerous situation, flying low and slow while hanging out of the helicopter, and you're carrying incendiary devices. It's all a pretty bad idea, and this has led to several fatal accidents over the years. And that's where, again, drones come in. The drone can carry a plastic sphere dispenser and drop these ping pong balls on target without anyone being on board, which gets the job done without risking any lives. And if we take a look at, here's a video of what the UAS looks like as it's doing that mission. So here's our heavy lift drone that's carrying the plastic sphere dispenser, and it's filled with ping pong balls, or the plastic spheres. And this is the view from the drone itself looking down as it's dropping spheres. They've already been injected with the antifreeze. So within 20 to 30 seconds, they're going to start a little fire. And again, with our drone, we can take a look back and see how that fire is taking. We got a safe observation. It's hard to see, but you can also tell on the left we've got crews patrolling the road on the left side there. But yeah, the aerial ignition is a huge asset now for us to make that job a lot safer. But
Scott,
these
really
tools
amazing.
also. I'm sorry.
It's
go
really
ahead.
amazing to look at the video there and see exactly just how steady those shots are. The I guess the internal gyroscopes or whatever in those machines are pretty advanced, because even the Osprey shot we saw earlier, I mean, that looks like it was shot from, a lockdown tripod. There was no movement.
Absolutely. That gimbal is what holds the camera in place, and it also allows you to move the camera, but it keeps it from vibrating, and that makes it, again, here's another good use for it. This is a great tool for our public affairs and communications specialists. So these aerial photos and videos, they provide a unique perspective and can show a big picture that you don't often get with ground-based photos. So this is our latest project that I worked on with NCTC photographer Ryan Haggerty. We went out to Idaho fish hatcheries, and we were capturing just a lot of aerial images. This is the Sawtooth fish hatchery, and from the ground, you don't see much other than the buildings. You don't even see those beautiful Sawtooth Mountains in the background, but we just get a little bit of elevation, and we can see what a great site this is located in, and we can see the river behind it, and you get a great perspective from getting that camera up in the air. And then in other use cases that we have here, here's another video or another picture from one of the first projects I did, working with the Southeast Region Office of Communications. They were looking to tell the story about the Altamaha River in Georgia and the conservation efforts that went on with that. So we did a lot of aerial photos and videos for that multimedia piece that's still on our Fish and Wildlife site today. But in other use cases, we have law enforcement officers also using unmanned aircraft, and they use it for search and rescue, for catching poachers, and we also use them for public safety missions. Back in 2021, after Hurricane Ida had hit the Southeast Louisiana Refuge Complex, we were asked to assist local law enforcement in locating an alligator that had reportedly attacked and killed a man in the floodwaters following the storm. And so by flying over the area where we thought the gator was, we found the trails that he was making through the vegetation, and eventually we did locate that gator. And if you can tell from the picture, at the very bottom of the picture, we have GPS coordinates of where the drone is. So we were able to relay the coordinates of the gator directly to law enforcement, who were then able to bring in a trapper and remove. This was a 12-foot, 500-pound gator. So just another one of the use cases that we have for helping with public safety missions too. And then speaking of hurricanes and emergency management, that's another common use that we have for these aircraft, is doing post-storm, like hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, post-storm damage assessments. So DOI had sent its first team of UAS pilots to assist with damage assessments after Hurricane Harvey hit the Houston area in 2017. And Fish and Wildlife remote pilots have been responding to storms almost every year since then. It might be to document the rack line of debris that washes into a refuge, like vehicles, or we've even had entire mobile homes that were lifted up and carried by the storm surge, like this one, over 2 miles, and came to rest on within the boundaries of the Cameron Prairie National Wildlife Refuge. So we document all this rack debris, because eventually all this is going to have to get cleaned up, and so we just kind of go in there and we're able to drop pins for where all of this debris is landed on the refuge. But while we're there for storm damage assessments, we can also do mapping of the roofs of all of our buildings to allow our facilities management staff to assess the damage without ever climbing on a ladder. So we can capture higher resolution photos than what's available from a satellite and real time, such in this picture here, that building in the lower right that's circled. We captured this entire complex of facilities on Cameron Prairie by taking overlapping pictures and stitching them together to create this one high resolution map. And then if we zoom in, now we can actually take measurements. You can see that the roof is damaged there, and we can take measurements off of this map, and we can calculate the cost of the repairs. So our facility maintenance folks can do that without ever having to get on a 30-foot ladder and get up on top of this roof. So again, making it safer for them to do their jobs.
And I would also think that with climate change being a focus of research these days, that things like these post-damage assessments from hurricanes or increased fire seasons. I think that climate change would also have some implications for drone use. True?
Absolutely. With the mapping that we can do, we can program the drone to map an area, and we can save that flight plan, and we can do it repeatedly on a weekly, a monthly, a yearly basis. So we can monitor things like coastal erosion, or we can just monitor, again, the pre and post habitat restoration, so that we can see change over time and see how things are, how the changing climate is affecting the habitat.
Cool. So we have the technology out there, and there's certainly a lot of uses for it. Let's say somebody is in the service and they're thinking, this has applicability to what I do, and they want to become a licensed UAS pilot for the service. What does that entail?
So in order to fly unmanned aircraft for the department, for the Fish and Wildlife Service, the first thing you need is to have leadership approval and support. So a UAS program, it's an investment of not only the funds to purchase the aircraft, but also of time for the initial and the recurring training for the pilot, as well as the time spent on proficiency and currency flights, and the time actually doing missions. So you need buy-in from your leadership right at the start before you ever can consider getting into this. But if you do have that leadership approval, then that's when you can start talking about acquiring a DOI approved aircraft. Before you can get into the actual DOI A450 basic remote pilot class, your office needs to work with the National Aviation Office to purchase a DOI approved aircraft, or you have to have a plan for sharing an aircraft with another office or program within your region. Training seats are really limited, and it takes a lot of work to host a class, so we can't train folks unless their office is actually going to support them with an aircraft. And once you have that support from your leadership and your office is committed to purchasing an aircraft, that's when you can actually talk about the certifications that you need, and you can start working on the prerequisites for attending that A450 basic UAS remote pilot class. So the prerequisites, you're going to need to take 4 classes through the Interagency Aviation Training website, but those are all online and you can do them at your own pace. Additionally, you'll need to start doing some self-study to take the FAA remote pilot exam, or commonly referred to as the Part 107 exam. There's a lot of different online prep courses to choose from, but it should take you about 1 to 2 hours of study each day for a week or two before you can pass. It's a 60-question multiple choice test. Once you've done that, once you've done your prerequisites, you've got your aircraft lined up, you've got your supervisor support, that's when you are eligible to attend an A450 basic remote pilot class. It's a week-long class in person where you're going to spend half the time learning about our DOI aviation policy, and the other half of that class is actually learning to fly a small quadcopter. And so once you've completed the class, you'll receive a DOI pilot card, and you'll be authorized to conduct unmanned aircraft flight operations for the service.
So Scott, you mentioned that you need to have a certain amount of management buy-in, and that's not just budgetarily to make sure that you can afford an aircraft and so forth, because there are some management responsibilities that go along with having people under you who are flying UASs, correct?
Absolutely. So every mission or project that we fly with an unmanned aircraft is required to have a project aviation safety plan. And that's true of our special use flights for manned aviation as well. Because there's a lot of risk associated with aviation operations, the supervisor that approves the project aviation safety plan, they're required to complete 2 courses for DOI aviation supervisors. Both of those classes can be completed online, and they'll provide the supervisor with the tools necessary to evaluate the risk of their aviation operations appropriately prior to actually approving them.
Now, looking at folks that want to be remote pilots and people that have become remote pilots, what are some of the biggest surprises that new remote pilots for Fish and Wildlife Service have, looking back on their train up to actually get to the field and utilize these technologies?
Well, most of our new pilots, they don't have a previous aviation background, so they're actually really surprised by how complicated operating in our national airspace can be. Reading aeronautical charts is one of the most difficult skills to master in this job, and it only comes by being exposed to a variety of situations and in different locations. So you might think that your project is in the middle of nowhere if you look at it on a normal map, without any airports for 50 miles. But you might not realize, unless you look at an aeronautical chart and know how to read it, that you're directly under a military training route where C-130 aircraft are doing low-level terrain-following maneuvers at 100 feet off the ground. And that would be very problematic if you were there to show up at the same time to do your low-altitude surveys with the drone. At all times, we give way to manned aviation. So if there is crewed aircraft in the area, we give way to them at all times, because it's the danger is for them to be in the air versus us on the ground. So we give way to them, but we have to understand where those aircraft are where they're going to be and when they're going to be in the same space as us, and we need to be able to know how to deconflict when we are working in close proximity to other crewed aviation. So this is like I said, it's a difficult skill to learn, and I'm still learning new things about our national airspace. And I've been flying for the past 9 years now, and there's every time I go to someplace new, there's always something new to see and something to learn.
All right, Scott, we're starting to run low on time here, but before we go, I just wanted to ask you sort of what is your best advice to wannabe Fish and Wildlife Service remote pilots?
Yeah, so I'll go back to when I talked about as far as the training goes. And first thing you want to do, if you think that drones are a good tool for your job, you need to sell it to your leadership and get them to buy in and support you before you do anything. The systems are, as I've told you, they're often as expensive as a vehicle, if not more. So you have to be able to justify the cost, which really shouldn't be that difficult when you look at the alternatives and the benefits. So it costs less than traditional aviation resources, but it's more importantly, it doesn't carry the same risk as putting people on board an aircraft. And then second, I just encourage you to learn as much as you can about it before you jump in. We have an excellent SharePoint site that has great resources to learn more about, with everything from a page on all the different policies, a frequently asked question page, a list of currently approved aircraft for use within the department, and a list of regional contracts. If anybody's listening to this that's not within the department, though, this is an internal Fish and Wildlife site, so it can only be viewed by DOI staff.
All right, Scott. Hey, thank you very much for your time and expertise today. We wish you much continued success with the service's UAS program. And just remember, you've been listening to Conservation Connect here at the National Conservation Training Center. And we'll be archiving this program for later if somebody wants to come back and refer to it. So, Scott, thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you, Brett.
All right, and with that, we'll be